Hello, BookTube. It is a beautiful blue sky Tuesday, just cool and wonderful, low humidity, cool in the morning, cool in the evening, nice and shirt sleeve warm in the height of the afternoon, just delightful. And I did not go to the Brattle Bookshop today. Those of you who are new to the channel, the Brattle Bookshop is an old bookstore in the heart of downtown Boston where I have been going for a long time. I love to go there. But I did not go to the Brattle today, even though it's a gorgeous day. But even though I didn't go to the Brattle today, I still got a pile of books, a gigantic pile of books that I want to show you. And in this video, unlike in most videos, I am trying to be a grown-up booktuber. I'm trying to be a real booktuber. I have some props to help with our discussion of the pile of books that I got. So we'll go through the mass market paperbacks first. I got a ton of mass market paperbacks, like for instance this one from these old Norton mass market paperbacks. This is Ever Since Darwin, the first one of Stephen Jay Gould's books that was packaged this way. Ever Since Darwin, Hen's Teeth, and The Panda's Thumb especially were packaged in these cute little mass market paperbacks, and that did the trick. Gould had one book before this. These are collections of the columns that he wrote for Natural History magazine. He had one collection before this that didn't really do much. Nobody really paid much attention to it. This book, when it first came out, when did this come out? 1977. When this first came out, you could not keep it in bookstores. It flew out of bookstores. It flew off metal spinner racks on train stations in New York City, in drugstores. It's delightful. His essays in here are absolutely delightful. And they are meant to be both self-contained, because they were monthly pieces on a deadline for a magazine, and also accessible. Totally accessible to, I mean, Natural History magazine is, I don't know if it's still in print, but at the heyday when I was getting it only for Gould's column, I imagine a lot of people were getting it only for Gould's column. At its heyday, it was a really well done, accessible, kind of National Geographic, Scientific American type science-oriented magazine that is not a specialist magazine, but is still going to give you fairly in detail information. It's not just going to be, bears, aren't they wacky, or things like that. It's going to be, at its height, Natural History had plenty of meat to the bones. And Stephen Jay Gould was a match made in heaven for there. So when I see these old mass markets, I would have grabbed it anyway. None of these books cost anything. So I should probably preface that. I'm not out any money. I just have a pile of books that I will assess in terms of what stays and what doesn't. It's not that I'm overbuying. It's not that I intend to keep all of these forever and a day. I view the book buying process as much like the nature of genetics. Every human being is born with a whole bunch of genetic mutations that render them different from their progenitors. Every single human being is born with that number of genetic mutations. Most of them are very minor, very inconsequential. The genetic pool, the genetic drift of the organism essentially, quote unquote, doesn't care. Some of them catch on. Some of them can build into something more, something that is noteworthily heritable. And they can affect the morphology of the being. So with the body and the gene pool, so too with book buying. I buy scattershot, but I don't keep scattershot. Every one of the books that I get can be viewed as a tiny site mutation. But who knows which ones will become important, which ones will grow to become important. Some of them I can guess, some of them not. That's how I view this. Or as I always put it, a wave washing in and leaving some stuff behind, but not a lot, and then it washes out, and then it washes back, and some stuff is washed away and others left behind. That's the natural process here. The key that keeps it healthy when it comes to books is you have to have that washing out part. If you don't have that, if you're just accumulating books hand over fist without ever getting rid of any, then it becomes unhealthy, in the same way that, to extend the wave metaphor until it dies, if the wave keeps coming in and in, you have a flood. Everything's going to be destroyed. All right, now that we've covered that, I have a pile of books here. The next one is a Viking Portable Library. I love the old Viking Portable Library. The mass markets, the trade paperbacks that Viking did for some of the titles in their Viking Portable Library line were horribly made. So it wasn't really worth it to follow them to get any in that format. But they made a lot of these things in mass market. Once upon a time, I had them all. They're usually very, very good. And so when I see them, I grab them. They're still really, really worth having. I found the Viking Portable Dante. We know of him, do we not? On BookTube. This is edited by Paolo Milano. And this has, I think, the whole of the Divine Comedy, the whole of the Vita Nuova. If you're going to do a Viking Portable Dante, that's what you're going to have. Yes, this has the whole of the Divine Comedy, translated by Lawrence Binion. It has the whole of Vita Nuova, translated by Dante Gabriel Rossetti. And it has excerpts from the rhymes and the Latin prose works. Fantastic. These things they came with an introduction. Every one of them had an introduction. Very little else in the way of notes. But sometimes you're getting things in the Viking Portable Library volume that, at the time, weren't available anywhere else. That was certainly true for instance, the Machiavelli volume. The Viking Portable Machiavelli had all of the prints, sure. But it had lots of other things, too, that you wouldn't find except in some sort of obscure academic volume. And that was a boon to ordinary people buying good books at their bookstore. I used to find it an incredibly refreshing thing to find one of these in a bookstore amidst all of the junk. So, very happy to find this. It's a Viking Portable that I don't have. Then the next one that we'll look at here, probably in less charitable mind frames in years past, I might have considered this some of the junk. But I want it. It's the only thing by this author that I want. And I've always sort of had a soft spot for this particular paperback. What is this? Bantam. This is Bantam from the 1980s, I want to say. This printing is, 1972. Okay, but I didn't see it in 1972. I'm pretty sure this was in the 80s. No, right, yes. The cover art for this thing, which is the whole thing that I'm talking about, was 1985. This is a 1980s version of The Day of the Jackal by Frederick Forsyth. His breakout book about the nuts and bolts details behind a plan to assassinate Charles de Gaulle. That's what the whole book is about. It's about an attempt to assassinate him. And what that would be like. What are the logistics of a plan to assassinate a head of state? This had a long and complicated publication history. Lots of publishers weren't interested in it because de Gaulle, he was still alive when Forsyth was hawking this book around. And so some publishers and publisher readers, back at the time when publishers had readers, they looked at all sorts of submissions to the House to sort of read through them. So it's not a question of the reputation of the author or what we can get it for on the cheap or anything like that. Instead, readers used to be a hardy band of warriors. They would take satchels full of submissions home with them and read them to see what they were like. They had to do reader reports on a lot of those things for their superiors at the publishing house, but a lot of those books didn't get reader reports. There was just a huge amount of work. What I wouldn't give, I know this is a digression, which is a little bit of a rarity on this channel, what I wouldn't give for somebody to do a history of publisher readers. They go back centuries. Well, that would be so interesting. I wonder if there was such a history, and I just don't know about it. Jason Harrigan would probably know. Anyway, to get back to the book. Some of those publisher readers said, well, why would anybody care about a thriller about an attempt to assassinate de Gaulle when anyone buying this book in bookstores 2 years from now when it comes out will know that there was no such attempt, that de Gaulle is still alive. Almost like you need to explain that this is a novel, that you can generate a huge amount of interest that way, regardless of whether or not the historical personage is still alive. But eventually, somebody took a flyer on it, and it sold like crazy. Like crazy. Then it got picked up by America, and sold even more. Sold just mountain loads. If I remember correctly, the publisher deal that Forsyth struck in the UK, and especially in the US, was usurious. It was horrifyingly unfair to him. And even so, he made mountains of money off this thing. And he used to say all the time in interviews that he'd had no money before then. I don't like anything else that I've read by Frederick Forsyth. And I probably don't actually like this one. It just has that particular charm when an author writes their book. There's some sort of energy there that isn't duplicatable and that really can win you over to a book. I often say that, and it's been repeated by more caustic wits than me, that everybody has a book in them. Now, an old friend of mine used to say, and that's precisely where it should stay. And plenty of other people said everybody has a book in them, but, you might not want to read it. I strongly believe that everybody has a book in them, and I also strongly believe that most people, and I mean 99%, only have one book in them that is imbued with that magic. They might have other things to say, but they don't. That magic is only going to happen once. Sometimes I'm proven wrong. I thought that about John le Carré, and I was wrong. Frederick Forsyth, I think I'm right. I think The Day of the Jackal was his book. And I saw this. I grabbed it. It's got a little bit of schmutz on it. I will do my best to clean that up because I want to reread this. I probably haven't reread this since the mid-'80s when it came out in this edition, which I just like so much. I was so happy to see it again. Then we have... this also has some schmutz on it. Well, I'll clean these up. I'll clean these up completely. This is another example. I came up with one of these the other day. This is another old mass market. I love this cover design for this author. This is Martha Grimes, Help the Poor Struggler. Another Richard Jury novel of hers, Richard Jury of Scotland Yard. These are very atmospheric English murder mysteries, every one of which has the Baroque name of a certain pub, of a real life pub. The one of the interesting bits of these is that Martha Grimes was not English. She just wanted to contribute to the kinds of books that she loved so much. I will have to clean up that stuff. I bet that can clean up. And I loved these old who was this? Dell. This old Dell cover design. I had them all at one point, and I got rid of them like an idiot. I got rid of them. When a run on a mass market, I don't need ebooks of Martha Grimes. I would like ebooks of Martha Grimes, but there's something about the charm of reading it and rereading it in the form I read it originally. I read this when it first came out in, I bet, the 1980s. 1985, the exact same year. I read this in the exact same year as I read The Day of the Jackal in that cover. And it sort of hooked me then. It became a favorite of mine then in this format. I'm hoping that Random Chance brings all of these cover designs in my path. That would be great. I'll clean this up and give it a reread. Once again, I lament, as I always do, that March Mystery Madness only happens once a year. I love murder mysteries. I love reading them. I love thinking about them and comparing them to other murder mysteries, even writing them. And I love talking about them. I can do that on this channel, but March Mystery Madness is still a long way away. What else have we got here? Okay, this next one is something that I have a prop for. This is one of my props. The other day, I showed you this. The Infernal World of Branwell Bronte by Daphne du Maurier. This is nonfiction. This is her biography of Branwell Bronte, the missing Bronte in the family. And I had a hardcover of this. I got a hardcover of this at the Brattle, and I got it, and I was happy to see it. But at the time, both to myself, and I think in that haul video, I said, what I really want is this dorky old Avon paperback. Once upon a time, Daphne du Maurier came out, all of her came out in these dorky old Avon paperbacks with the really cheap, acidic paper and whatnot. I found this and I thought, gee, that's great. That's the form that I wanted in. I'll be very careful with it. I'll try not to destroy it on a reread. And today I found another old Avon Daphne du Maurier, and it's also nonfiction. And it dovetails with what I've been reading recently. This is The Winding Stair. This is her sequel to, what was it, the Golden Boys? The Roaring Boys? It's a biography of Francis Bacon. And he's been on my mind because I've read a couple of Shakespeare authorship books that posit Bacon as the guy, as the main suspect. I believe that sinister-looking fellow there in the red dress is supposed to be Francis Bacon. I don't know why he looks like that. Maybe the artist got all of this stuff done and then just sort of lost interest. just gave him a dressing gown after that. I assure you that Francis Bacon did a lot of things in his life. He was a very questionable, interesting character, but he never wore his wife's clothing. I guarantee you that he never did. I wonder if this is going to tell me whether or not which book it's a sequel to. It might not. What was it called? Golden Lads. It wasn't Roaring Boys and it wasn't Golden Boys. It was Golden Lads, which exists in this Avon paperback. I didn't see it today, but I'm now convinced that the gods want me to have it. This also has schmutz on it. Probably a lot of these things were in somebody's basement. I found them in a basement, but they might have been in a basement or an attic or something. They can be cleaned. Then this next one, I also have a prompt. I have recommended many times on this channel The Light at the End by Skip and Spectre. It's one of the very first really gritty urban vampire novels. It's terrific, absolutely terrific to read. And they did other books. And one of the ones that I found just recently in perfect condition was this thing, Animals, about sexy were-beings in just like the day that it was made. I remember reading this and getting rid of it somewhere along the line. I never got rid of my copy of The Light at the End, but I got rid of this. And I couldn't figure out why. I thought about it over the years, now and again, always telling myself the Brattle will provide. Sooner or later, I will see a copy of Animals by Skip and Spectre. But while I was thinking that, I was thinking, I wonder if they wrote anything else. And I'm sure that they did. I did not know about this. This is called The Bridge. Look at that cover. If I'm sorry that March Mystery Madness only happens once a year, then I'm equally sorry that Garb August only happens once a year. Look at that cover. Although, given what I've read of these two, they might be schlocky, but they aren't garbage. It doesn't matter. I would read this in Garb August in a heartbeat. I don't know if I can wait that long. I don't know if I can sit on it until August. That's a long way away. What have we got here? For 100 years, we've been tossing our toxic waste over our shoulders. No more. People have never actually tossed toxic waste over their shoulders, but I know what you mean. This morning, while we slept, something woke up. It's virulent, malign, intelligent, ambitious. It's in our food, our water, our air. It's inside our bodies themselves, and it's not leaving. We are. I love it. Absolutely love it. Probably toxic stuff was dumped under this bridge, and the biosphere has spawned this thing. Just fantastic. Another Skip and Spectre book. One that I didn't know that it existed. Then this next one is science fiction. It's not a cover that I know. I like almost every science fiction fan that I know of. Every science fiction fan that I know of knows of this book. Science fiction fans of a certain age have read it and maybe had thoughts on it, maybe even liked it. But I've never seen this cover. This is Ringworld by Larry Niven. I like this cover actually more than the cover that is famous, the American paperback that I think probably came out after this. And this is a story of, it's thickly enmeshed in a lot of Larry Niven's ongoing universe building. But it's the story, at its heart, it is hard science fiction about a concept called a ring world that simulates gravity by the way that it turns, and that has vast amounts of real estate that you can use for habitable living. You can make it into an artificial world. In other words, if you can sort of handle the physics, Larry Niven is positing in this book, if you can sort of handle the physics behind it, you don't actually need to make an artificial world that is a globe. It can be a ring and still have gravity, atmosphere, daylight and nighttime if you've got darkness panels that rotate inside the ring to put certain periods in the dark. And I very much want to reread this. I read this, oh God, I think I've only read Ringworld once. And when I did read it the first time, probably 50 years ago, I concentrated on the science, the way a lot of people do when they read this. Actually, when did Ringworld come out? Oh, good Lord. This is signed by Larry Niven. What on earth? This is signed from 1984. Wow. This came out in 1970. All right, so 50 years ago. And I probably read it then and never since. And when I did, I probably concentrated on the thing a lot of people probably do the first time they read this, which is the science. The ring world, like, for instance, a Dyson sphere, is an amazing science concept for you to just think about. How it would work, what life on a ring world would be like. And the more I look back on it, when I found this, I suddenly remembered there's a lot of human drama in this book. There's a lot of human and social world building in this book that doesn't have anything to do with the physics and the technology of the ring world itself. So it's ripe for a reread. It's the pages front and back here, the cover front and back are wobbling just a bit. I may have to reinforce this thing to read it, but unless this is one of those rare Steve finds where this edition of this paperback is worth $500 online or something like that, I'm not going to hesitate to reinforce it. I don't actually check on those things. I probably should. I could make a great little nest egg for brattle hunting. Speaking of which, not many of you have been calling in credit to the brattle lately. But anyway, these aren't brattle books, so it doesn't matter. All right, this next one, I don't have a prompt. I should, but I don't. This may be one of the finds of the day. I've never seen that Ringworld edition. And the Skip Inspector is great. And the Daphne du Maurier and the old Avon paperback is great. That Frederick Forsyth. There are a lot of finds today. But this is really pleasing. Del Rey Books for a long time did a series of books called The Best Of, where they would pick a science fiction writer, a fantasy writer, and give you the best of. On this channel just recently, we saw the best of Cordwainer Smith, which was one of their most successful volumes. But they did those volumes for everybody. Everybody. I don't know what a full collection of them looked like. There are probably over 20 of them. I have a whole bunch of them. I have Philip K. Dick. I have Fritz Leiber. I have Randall Garrett. I have a couple of copies of the best of Cordwainer Smith. But I have never had a copy of this. This is the best of Elsprague de Camp. Will you look at that? With a Darrell K. Sweet cover. You will know, some of you will know this artist from his covers on things like the Xanth novels. Just fantastic. I had no idea this volume ever existed. I've never seen it before. It's just fantastic. I'm so happy to have this. I'm going to do a lot of Elsprague de Camp reading. That's fantastic. And then this last paperback, I have a prompt for. We saw the other day, I went to the Boston Public Library book sale and I found this thing. The Time Bender by Keith Laumer, which is what is it? Liam O'Flaherty? Does it say? Lafayette O'Leary. Lafayette O'Leary story about a guy who goes to a bunch of fractured worlds, a bunch of alternate reality, alternate physics, alternate magic type worlds with this classic Rowena cover there. I found this at the Boston Public Library, and today I found another Lafayette O'Leary story. This is The World Shuffler, with yet another Rowena cover there. They're on a magic flying carpet there. So believe it or not, through sheer happenstance, I seem to be building a Keith Laumer library. I don't know why that would be, but I haven't read the Lafayette O'Leary. Is it Lafayette O'Leary? Yes, the Lafayette O'Leary novels in forever. So they're worth a revisit. Then we move on to the stuff that isn't mass market paperbacks. There are a lot of these, sorry, but this first one is utterly fascinating. I had no idea that it existed. It's work in translation. I don't know what to expect from this thing. This is a novel by Stefan Heim, translated, I assume, from the German, by Alexander Locascio, and it is a novel, a huge novel, about Radek, about the weird, deeply untrustworthy but deeply compelling intellectual figure, right to the left of Lenin, right to the left of he was involved in all of the intellectual ferments, political ferments of the first half of the 20th century, and eventually caught up in the Great Purge, in Stalin's Great Purge in the 1930s. Urban legend at the time had it that he was compelled to write the text of his own trial, both sides, the prosecution and the defense, because he was a writer. He wrote a ton of things, never actually stopped writing. And he was, of course, convicted in that show trial and sent to some sort of work camp where he was murdered in, I think, ambiguous circumstances. He shows up in Kotkin's biography of Stalin, for instance. He's all over Kotkin's biography of Stalin and the two biographies that I've read of Lenin. I cannot imagine what someone could do with a novel of this guy. I've never heard of this thing before. What do we have here? Does this say anything? Through this dramatic history, we become intimate with the story of the maverick and internationalist Karl Radek. That wasn't his real name. He took that name out of a book, of all things. He was incredibly bookish. Beginning as Lenin's companion at the dawning of the October Revolution and as the editor of the newspaper of record throughout the Soviet era, Radek later became Stalin's favorite intellectual, only to find himself entangled in the great purges of the late 30s and scripting his own trial. Okay, well, they're going to go with that. I'm not sure how much of that is true. In this, his last historical novel, best-selling author, German author Stefan Heim reveals Radek as a brilliant Bolshevik journalist and politician who found himself at every turn of the wheel of fate. Well, the second part of that, you definitely get that impression when you encounter this guy in biographies of other people. You definitely get the impression that he was present at every turn of fate's wheel, because in every major event, there he is all of a sudden in the chapter. I had no idea that anyone ever wrote a historical novel about him, much less that it was translated into English. That's a fascinating bit of exploration I'm going to be doing. Then we have another huge novel, but this one I know quite well. This one is even bigger than Radek. It's gigantic. It's, in fact, this has got to count for Doorstopper Doom, right? Yeah, 815 pages from the Dalkey Archives. I don't know how to classify this book. I know that it's brilliant. I feel certain, if there's any justice in the world, that eventually it will be seen as brilliant as it was. It featured very prominently in my Steve Reads Year's End list. This is Wits by Joshua Cohen. This is Joshua Cohen's enormous novel that I just happened to find. I noticed that it has a little schmutz on it too. I would clean all of these things up. I don't know how to describe what's going on in this book. It is weird and absurdist. There are parts of it that are side-splittingly funny. On one level, it is about the last natural Jew in the world. But it's also a weird kind of Jew-hating and Jew-loving anti-Semitic dystopia that our main character, Benjamin, ends up in, finds himself in, tries to fight against. It's just... there are so many. The closest thing that comes to it, there are two books that are kind of sort of like this in their ambition and wry humor. One would be Michael Chabon's book, The Yiddish Policeman's Union, and the other would be The Yid. But I don't know of anything that really does what this does. I'm very happy to have found a copy. I had a big, fat advance copy of this thing back when it came out. When was this? The early aughts? When did this come out? 2010. And I was back in the reviewing world. Open Letters Monthly was open for business back then. I was writing for a whole bunch of places then, as I am now. And I got an advance copy of this and the finished copy. I got rid of both of them to people that wanted it. And haven't seen it since. That's 22 years. Or 12 years. That's 12 years. I haven't seen a copy since. Not even at the Brattle. And I found one. So very much worth a reread. I mean, a lot of these things, this is very much a thing that is going to impinge itself on my normal reading, because there's a lot of stuff here I want to reread. This next one was a format buy. I have this in a hardcover that I don't particularly like. I don't think it's particularly pretty. It's not particularly well made. It cracks. It makes a cracking noise whenever I open it even a little. I had never seen it in a trade paperback, and now that I have, I want the trade paperback to replace the hardcover. This is Nick Pianson's book, Spying on Whales, in a Penguin trade paperback that I'd never seen before. I would have spotted this if I still had a retail bookstore to go to. I'm sure I would have, but I don't. So I had no idea what this looked like. I'd never seen it before. I will replace my hardcover with this. I don't revisit it enough to need, a hardcover anyway. I wonder if I'm blurbed in here, now that I think about it. Carl Safina is blurbed in here. Bob Sapolsky, Edward O. Wilson, fantastic. You don't need me if you've got a company like that. Fantastic. Not even a Kirkus blurb in here. But this is delightful. It's a wonderful book. The reason for its title, among other things, is that we don't know what these people do. We have to spy on them because we only get to observe them a tiny fraction of their time. It's not like it's not like you're Jane Goodall. You can't sit there and watch what whales do. There's no way for humans to do that. So you have to spy on them just a bit. You have to spy on them and make your best guesses. I really like a good whale book. A good whale book will not be 90% about the industry of killing whales. It will be about them as much as we can know. So I was happy to find this. I will find my hardcover, which I believe is in the little book room, and give it an honorable retirement. Then we have something for the gays. You gotta have something for the gays at all times. This is by Andrew Byerly. And I remember reading this. This came out in the early aughts, I want to say. Yeah, 2002. This came out in 2002, and I read it and thought it was touching. It's packaged to look just like all the other gay fiction at the time, but I honestly thought there was more to it than a lot of that gay fiction at the time. So I'm going to read it again and see if it strikes me that way. It's yet another book on this list that is a reread of With a Vengeance. And this is, the title certainly seems like the gay fiction of the time. This is The Winter of Our Discotheque. And it's about it, but well, let me read it to you. Before his 18th summer, Tony Alexmenos was content to spend his mornings riding the waves, his afternoons pumping gas, and his nights secretly lusting after bronzed surfer boys. The day that changes everything begins like any other, with a car pulling into the station as Tony, fresh from the sparkling Atlantic, quickly towels off and dons his coveralls. Hurrying out to service the gleaming Cadillac convertible, he never dreams that inside is a would-be fairy godfather who is about to transform his life. Obscenely wealthy Dallas Eden can't believe his eyes. What's a luscious boy like this doing in a grimy Florida service station? Quelling the urge to pounce on the sexy young thing, Dallas sets out instead to win Tony's friendship and his trust. Only then can he begin to transform this youthful Greek god into a protege worthy of the Dallas harem. His first move, to hire Tony as an assistant gardener at his Florida estate. His next, to see that his charge gets a full scholarship to Sanctuary College's drama program. But everything doesn't go according to Dallas's plans, for it is away at college that Tony meets Connecticut Jones, a young professor who, though deeply closeted, is far from immune to Tony's charms. When a prestigious fellowship falls into Connecticut's lap, he heads to New York City with Tony. I remember really enjoying this, but I remember thinking at the time, coming away from it thinking, okay, that was supposed to be, it's clearly packaged. I mean, even the cover copy makes it sound like a romp. And I came away from it thinking, there's a lot more going on here than just a romp. So, so I will give it another try, and we will see. Then this next one, another find of the day. This was a really good book haul just for finds of the day. But this thing came right in time because I go through trade paperbacks of this. I tear them to shreds because I use it so often. I've recommended this thing many times, but I've never seen the hardcover. This hardcover. I've seen the crappy American hardcover. This is the Assassin's Cloak. In hardcover, it has a library jacket on it. It's got the cloth bookmark there, and this is this is also Doorstopper Doom, or it would be under normal circumstances. This is 1,000 pages. Well, this version is 700 pages. This is UK. This is a UK. I had this exact cover with Alec Guinness on the spine there, just staring at you forever. Alec Guinness staring at you forever. I have the trade paperback of this. This is the UK trade paperback. Looks just like this. But this is the hardcover, which is great because I go back to this so many times that paperbacks don't hold up. This is a gigantic compendium of journals and diaries. Set up not according to person. So you're not flipping through saying, all right, here's Stephen Spender, okay, here's Alec Guinness, et cetera, et cetera. Instead, it's set up by day of the year. You go through the whole of the year. So March 3rd, you would get an entry from John Evelyn 500 years ago. You would get an entry from, I don't even know, Daniel Defoe, and then Virginia Woolf, and then Noel Coward. It would be that day, but you would be getting diary entries from different centuries for every day of the year. And you might tell yourself, I know people who've loved this book, at my recommendation, who have said, all right, well, this will just take over my life unless I impose some discipline. So what I'm going to do is just read the day of today. So whatever, like today is, this is what? October 11th, something like that. I've had friends say, all right, well, it's October 11th, so I'm just going to read October 11th. And I will keep it on my bedside, and I will just read that day every day. It never works. It never works. It's just too good. It's just too hypnotizing. Not just because of that organizational structure, but also because of the editors. Who are the editors here? Irene and Alan Taylor. You could have that daily structure, and this could still be a snoozer if you didn't pick right. And these editors really, really pick right. So this is it's endlessly readable, endlessly fascinating. I found a trade paperback that I'd never seen before just a little while ago. I hauled a trade paperback. That thing started to fall apart. Pages started to fall out of it. Trade paperbacks that I have, even the well-made UK trade paperback of this very design, it starts to fall apart, mainly because of how often I go back to it, because I love it so much. So I found a hardcover. Great, fantastic. And then this last one is an earlier book. It's illustrated It's by an author I really like. Her credit in the Bank of Steve could not be higher. Her name is Julie Zickfuss, and she wrote a book called Saving Jemima, about taking in a blue jay. Taking in a jay and rehabilitating it. A classic, bring a wild bird into your home, learn all sorts of life lessons from that bird. But Saving Jemima is wonderful. It's a fantastic book. And largely because of the incredibly charming nature of the author's prose. So I found this, Letters from Eden, A Year at Home in the Woods. And it's illustrated all throughout, color and black and white, by the author, all throughout. That's why it looks the way it does. That's why it's this size, because it's illustrated all throughout. I love books like this. Absolutely love them. And I think I knew about this book, but I don't think I've ever had a copy. And now I do. so this is going to be, I will probably browse through this today. The one that's exerting the, Jupiter's own gravitational field is the Assassin's Cloak. I just have to resist it, that's all. Or otherwise, I'll spend all day and all night just living in that book. But anyway, that was a non-Brattle book haul today. We have Letters from Eden by Julie Zickfuss. We have the Assassin's Cloak in hardcover that somebody already put a plastic dust jacket on. We have The Winter of Our Discotheque, Spying on Whales, Wits by Joshua Cohen, his great novel, until he writes another one. We have Radek, a historical novel about Radek. That's the guy himself there. That's not cover art. That's a doctored photo. Then we have mass market paperbacks. We have The World Shuffler by Keith Laumer with a Rowena cover. We have The Best of L. Sprague de Camp, Darrell K. Sweet cover. Fantastic. He has a flair for drawing dragons. We have Ringworld by Larry Niven. I have to reinforce this just a bit, but it's a copy I've never had before. We have The Bridge by Skip Inspector. So now I have 3 novels by Skip Inspector. We have The Winding Stair, Daphne du Maurier's continuation of her biography of Francis Bacon. We have Help the Poor Struggler by Martha Grimes in the mass market paperback edition that I really like from Martha Grimes. We have The Day of the Jackal by Frederick Forsyth, also in the mass market paperback edition that I really like. Forsyth and Daphne du Maurier have that in common. Day of the Jackal sold like crazy. It completely changed the author's life. And Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier did the same thing. It sold like crazy, took off like a natural phenomenon, and completely changed the author's life. Then we have the Viking Portable Dante, to add to my growing collection of Viking portables. And finally, Ever Since Darwin by Stephen Jay Gould. So not a bad book haul for a day when I wasn't expecting to have a book haul at all. Very nice. I will find room for these things. And that's quite long enough, so I will wrap this up. But I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.